this is our project, Inequality in the Fashion Market, for our sociology project. We are going to specifically be looking at companies and how they hire people, who they hire, and see if we can find some inequality. So why we chose this market was because there's a large market that so many people come into contact with on a daily basis, and we had easy access to potential interviewers through current friendships with employees in the fashion market, within people in our group. And what we're expecting to see in this market is employees hiring people that are similar to their current employee base. We're also kind of expecting to see some sort of discrimination or stigma within this market, either within the people that these companies hire or within the customers that these companies have. Now, to introduce our two interviewees that we did. One is an employee that used to work at American Apparel. Her name is Amalia, and the other, whose name is Bree, she currently works at Nordstrom's downtown. Both of these interviews were done in private with a one-on-one setting with the interviewer and the interviewee, and we did not supply questions to the interviewees before we interviewed them.
And what kind of people are usually hired?
I'd say they definitely look for a certain aesthetic. Like, they try to include a wide range of people, but it's always people that kind of fit into like the retro look and that like to wear certain clothes. They like people that look natural, that don't wear a lot of makeup. And even if they don't explicitly say any of that, I definitely noticed that in the workers. They all kind of have a similar way of dressing, and yeah.
A lot in common with your managers or co-workers?
I think, yeah, I definitely got along with them. Most of them were young and kind of like in a similar life stage, even though I was one of the only ones in school, so that was one big difference, just like in our daily lives. I had class and most of them didn't, but besides that, we had a lot in common. They were easy to talk to, and yeah. Sorry, I was actually here when this happened, but there was just a guy that came into the store with a huge bag, an empty bag, and when he left the store, the bag was full, and it was clear that he had stolen a lot of clothes. But the problem is we're not allowed to personally search people's belongings, so this caused a lot of problems because the alarm would go off and we would ask them if they had anything, but that was all we could do. So that happened with this guy. The alarm went off, and since we couldn't search his bag, he just left, and we went upstairs and realized that he had taken just like a whole stack of jeans. So like, yeah, like almost $2,000 worth of clothes. Yeah, so that was just like one of the examples. And especially since American Apparel, the one I worked at, was on the Ave, we had a lot of people that were just kind of out of it that would come in just to mess around, and yeah, so we had to be really aware of that and vigilant.
Was there like a certain stigma kind of like with the people coming in like that you saw?
Yeah, there definitely was. Like, if a certain class of person would come in, or like a big group of young people, then we would be told by our manager to keep an eye on them. Or like I remember one time just a group of teenage boys came in and they all went downstairs, and when something like that happened, our manager would always tell someone to go down there even if we weren't doing anything, just to kind of keep an eye on them and to make sure nothing was going on. So there definitely was like a stigmatizing of certain types of people in the store.
So conclusions that we can draw from what Amalia talked about. So most of her workers, her co-workers, were similar in aesthetic within the way that they looked and how they would dress. Amalia states that even if the company didn't directly come out and say this, that she definitely noticed that trend. She also talked about how her coworkers and her managers were at a similar life stage, so that made it easier to get along with each other and understand each other. Also, Amalia talks about stigma and discrimination based on types of customers that would come into the store. So basically, the main conclusion that we can draw from Amalia's interview is that companies seek to hire employees that are similar to their current employee base. And what this can do is create inequality, because if certain groups of people aren't represented in that current employee base, then they will not be hired, or they will be less likely to be hired.
And what kind of people are usually hired?
super outgoing people, people with like passion, drive, people who love fashion, positive people.
So with your managers and coworkers, do you have a lot of common with them?
Yeah, most of my team, a lot of them went to UW, a lot of them majored in communications like I am, did the sales program. We're all really outgoing people. So yeah.
Okay, so what we can gather from Bree's interview is that personality was emphasized a lot in the hiring process. She talks about how they looked for things that employees could bring to the table. She also talks about how their coworkers had a lot in common. They had the same major, they went to the same school, they were all outgoing, and so the main conclusion that we can draw from Bree is that companies seek to hire new employees that resemble personalities specifically of their current employee base, going back to the conclusion that we could draw from Amalia's interview as well. So there is similarity between these two interviews. Okay, now to back up our argument and what we see in our interviews, we can use a couple of the readings that we have discussed in this class, one of them being Lauren Rivera's work on cultural fit. So from Lauren Rivera's work, we can see that companies seek to hire employees that are similar to them, this cultural fit that Rivera talks about. So basically, if groups of people are not similar to the people doing the hiring, then they will be less likely or excluded from the hiring process altogether. This creates inequality. And we can see a similar aspect in David Pager's and Hannah Shepard's work on the sociology of discrimination, talking about how companies seek to hire new employees that, again, are similar to their current employee base. And going back to the same argument that we've been talking about for this entire video, if groups of people are not represented in that current employee base, then they will be less likely or excluded from hiring altogether, which creates inequality. One thing that we should mention and we need to keep in mind with our study or our project is that we did only focus on fashion market or companies in the Seattle area. Seattle is known to be more accepting and tries to not discriminate against people, so this might not be the most representative sample of this problem around the US, but as we have shown, there is some possibility for this inequality to occur elsewhere.